Okay. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you so much for being here today to learn more about my case and hear my side of the story. I'm very, very grateful for your ongoing responsible coverage of my case and how the press has protected our children's privacy. I want to first of all thank God and state that, as He says, when you really believe, your faith can and will move mountains. Faith can help keep you strong, even in the most unbearable situations, as in mine when my children were far from me and I saw their incredible distress. I need to again thank my wonderful attorney, Robert Hoffman, who has been steadfast through this tough time and who is just the best family lawyer ever. I also want to thank the one and only Bobby Chillygate Newman, who I know wishes he could be here, but can't, and the pillars and legs of my case, attorney Amy Harris. Thank you to all of my friends and family and to everyone who has rallied around the children during this tough time. I am overjoyed that our three amazing children are coming home, and so helpful and hopeful for healing, and so hopeful for the healing and the bright future that lies ahead for them. I'm so grateful that the jury ruled that I should be primary parent. I believe that this ruling is, in fact, a decision by the jury that parental alienation did happen in my case, and that Alex did systematically and tragically alienate our children. Parental alienation is child abuse. It causes devastation, tragedy, and severe trauma to millions of parents in the United States alone. Untrained professionals and school officials can miss alienation. In my case, even when I shared evidence, they didn't believe me. They ignored what was going on and put their focus solely on me. I was forced into 800 hours of therapy, the equivalent of about 40 years of therapy, while the experts deliberately ignored Alex and gave him a broad pass to do whatever he wanted, including severely alienating the children. The court is the children's last line of defense. The jury has spoken, and I'm confident that Judge Naranjo will rule immediately and proactively to move the children into my custody and to protect them from further abuse. In doing this, Judge Naranjo can right many wrongs and become a hero for alienated children and their parents across America. Alex has been hostile to me as recently as yesterday, and the children need to come home. His press conference, along with being fake news and conducted in violation of court orders, was a documentation of the alienation tactics he uses, as well as an illustration of how he lied in court. Alex's actions have forced me to set the record straight. Contrary to many of the misleading and defamatory statements made by Alex, I didn't start this fight. And Alex is a victim, but not of my actions or the press, but rather a victim of the greed of his own lawyers and court-appointed experts who preyed off his rage and amplified the conflict in order to profit off of our children's distress. The truth is, for years I have been on the defense from legal action after legal action filed by my ex-husband, Alex Jones. These filings, in addition to seeking to take away all time and possession of my children away from me, included attempts to force drug me and to deny me my First Amendment rights. These filings were largely based on the false and perjurious statements of court-appointed guardian ad litem experts and the alienated false allegations of my children, many of which the children themselves have refuted in front of experts and therapists. Due to Alex and his entourage's ongoing false accusations, their aggressive affront against my parental rights, and outright perjury, I have had less visitation with my children over the past 3 years than drug dealers, alcoholics and addicts, and sex offenders. Contrary to what people believe on the internet, I received no alimony or child support from Alex Jones. I believe the judge will change this soon, but I have been financially devastated by staying in this fight. I have spent over $2 million in legal and court-related fees and expenses. I have had to pay for hundreds of hours of therapy and hundreds of hours of supervision. I believe my case should be important to America for many reasons, and that it can and will matter and affect change in how family courts use experts and deal with parental alienation. Alex's aggression has forced me and our children into the public eye. I have launched my new website, splitcity.com, to help Americans understand our complicated case, learn more about parental alienation, and effect change. Again, my sincerest thanks to the jury and gratitude for this victory. It's a victory for alienated children and their parents across America. I'm so grateful and glad my children are coming home. For more information on my case, parental alienation, and to understand the family court system, please visit splitcity.com, and please watch this short video, which is 3 reasons why America should care about our custody case. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Jones, and I was married to Alex Jones for 12 years. We were together for 15. Here are 3 reasons why our custody case should matter to America. Reason number 1. Parental alienation is a national tragedy and affects millions of people across the country. Reason number 2. In Texas, experts who can come into play, who are supposed to represent the children, have almost judicial power, are almost lawsuit immune, and in my case, lied about me and even destroyed their files. Reason number 3. Money and power just shouldn't matter in family court, nor should children ever be treated as a commodity for lawyers and experts to make money off of. Sadly, in our case, that's just what happened, and it shouldn't matter to America because family courts can be a nightmare for children and their parents. In my case, experts forced me into hundreds of hours of therapy, charged hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then destroyed their files. They lied about me, and they barely looked at Alex Jones at all. The experts thought it was okay for Alex to attend, maybe 10 hours of therapy. They didn't care about his show. Those who viewed it had no concerns about his behavior at all, and most chose not to even take a gander. Our divorce and custody case lasted over 3.5 years. Now a jury has decided that I should be primary parent to our children. My jury trial victory should serve as a victory call to America to wake up and learn more about parental alienation. Parental alienation is child abuse. It affects millions of Americans. And that's why I've launched SplitCity.com, a website devoted to all things divorce with complete ongoing coverage and updates about my case and its history. I believe that knowledge is power, and that what happened to my family in my case can and will change how things play out in family court. Stay informed. Let's stop parental alienation and learn how to divorce or separate better. The future of our country depends on it. We can do this. Between your way and my way is a better way. SplitCity.com. Hi, my name is Kelly Jones. And
There it is again. So we'll take questions from anybody. Oh, yes, of course, Robert would like to say something.
Yeah, just a couple words. Parental alienation really is counterintuitive. People think that if children reject a parent, that they're doing so because that parent has engaged in some sort of serious conduct that's caused the children to drift away. And really, parental alienation is the opposite, which is where a parent uses undue influence on the children to cause the children to reject a parent such as Miss Jones, where there's no valid reason to do so. And this was an amazing victory for so many reasons. Number one, to have this incredible mother with a heart of gold and steel, if you will, fighting for her children against incredible odds. Number two, against a very powerful a man such as Alex Jones, who was able to fight us on every single front with motions filed and efforts to keep her from having the kind of relationship with her kids that she deserved. Number three, with some evidentiary rulings that came in during the course of the trial, where Mr. Jones' InfoWar, who he really was, is not something that the jury got to see very much of, and I think it would have had a tremendous impact if they did get to see that. Maybe number four in the list is that there probably was about 20 to 30 mental health professionals in the community who just got it wrong, and it seems incredulous that you could say 30 or 40 mental health professionals could get something wrong, but they did, and they all assumed that Kelly was doing something wrong that was driving the children away when the evidence and the hallmarks, if you will, of parental alienation were so clear. There was a court-appointed evaluation done by a Dr. Jeffrey Siegel, and he just missed the boat. He didn't recognize the 8 characteristics of alienated children, and he didn't recognize the 17 characteristics that alienated parents engage in. So we're very, very elated by this victory. Texas, as far as I know, is the only state, there may be a few others, but I think it's the only state that permits a jury trial, and we had so much faith in trying this case to a jury. We're so grateful to the jury's verdict in this case, and it was a tremendous team effort. Not only myself, Amy Harris in my office, who is the associate primarily responsible for building this case, Bobby Newman, who did an awesome job as co-counsel, particularly cross-examining Alex Jones, basically reducing Mr. Jones to just a ball of stress and anger, if you will, which was the real Alex Jones that we wanted to show. And then Mr. Newman also had Dawn Archer assisting him. I also had Jenny Smith in my office assisting me as well. Just want to really thank the jury and thank the system that it turned out the way it did. Lastly, our next area of focus, if you will, is what are called the non-jury issues, where the judge will decide when the children are actually shifted from Mr. Jones to Ms. Jones, what the visitation periods will be, who gets to make what decisions concerning the children, and so on. And we're very much looking forward to getting the children out of this environment, getting them the help that they need, having Mr. Jones recognize what needs to be done to stop alienating these children, and then finally to give these children two parents, both parents, who they're entitled to. That's what this case is about. Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody in the audience?
Yeah, you said the parental alienation argument is counterintuitive, and I think you were talking about the remedy to be a period of time when the children would mostly be or entirely be with Kelly and not with her father, but that presumes that the judge is buying into the parental alienation argument and it's cured. Do you think that that's the case?
Well, I don't know yet. I know that at 1:30 this afternoon we have a scheduling conference with the court to set a hearing where these issues will be decided by the judge. I'm not going to presume to suggest what the judge is thinking or how she may rule on this. I certainly hope that she does, of course, rule this way. I think the jury's verdict was basically a resounding finding, even though they don't actually answer a question on parental alienation, but our whole case was tried on parental alienation. And I think their verdict was a resounding yes, if you will, that parental alienation occurred. So the experts that testified during the course of this case indicated that almost the universal way to treat and help children who are in this situation, and there's millions of them like this across the country, it's so unfortunate, is to remove them from the alienating parent's home, put them in the targeted parent's home, or the rejected parent's home, which is Miss Jones, who, by the way, was the primary caretaker of these kids almost their whole life, homeschooled these kids, and had a fantastic relationship with these kids until Alex turned them against her. Anyway, the remedy is to take the children from Mr. Jones' possession, put the children into Miss Jones' possession, and then to have a period, maybe 90 days or so, depending on how Mr. Jones responds to what's required of him, where there's no contact between the children and Mr. Jones, during which time the children are getting intense therapy under a program such as Family Bridges, which has probably got the best success rate. Almost 95% success rate is what I understand in terms of breaking this cycle, reuniting the children with the rejected parent, and then allowing the alienating parent to come back into the picture again in a healthy and helpful way for the children. So I'm certainly hopeful, and I know Ms. Jones is hopeful, that's exactly what this next phase will result in.
And if I could just add to that too, I mean, if you just look at parental alienation at what it really is a kind of brainwashing of children where their memories are altered. They don't even remember how things used to be. They have a new perception of you. Your authority has been so undermined by the alienating parent that they don't even recognize you as an authority figure or a parent at all. You know, in my case, I mean, in severe cases, they exhibit some really severe symptoms, like they didn't even think I was the same person, like I had somehow changed into a completely different human being. The Family Bridges program is just this really brief 4-day period, and it has a tremendous success. And really, I think it's focusing. It's almost like a deprogramming of children, if you would, you know, call it that, maybe. And then it's just a brief no-contact period. I mean, I can say in 2015, I had 2 weeks total time with my older children, and 3 weeks with my daughter, who was 6 and 7 years old total during the whole year, and most of that was supervised. I've missed all school holidays, extended breaks, everything from, you know, Christmas to Easter with very, very limited visitation, often supervised, to, you know, all the Columbus days or whatever they call it now, the little breaks at school. So I definitely don't think that him missing this short amount of time would be anything but healing to the children and for him as well. And I really reach out to Alex to join me and to really see what that we can come together as a family. And I do believe our children need both parents, but when we can both be healthy and responsible.
Is Family Bridges, are they national, or they have a location? Do they have a presence here in Texas? Or
It's a national program. They do have presence here in Texas. And my understanding is that they tailor the particular program and treatment for the children and the situation that's at hand. So while Ms. Jones indicated there's a 4-day program, after the 4-day program, which is a very intense program between mom and the kids for reunification, then there's also as much as a year follow-up, which is done by the Family Bridges program. But there's apparently maybe 2 programs like this. There could be others. Unfortunately, there's not enough resources. There's not enough effort attended to helping these children in these situations. It's a highly specialized treatment that's necessary to bring the kids back to where they belong.
And how long has that been around?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to say a decade or more, but I don't know exactly.
And have there been other cases, or any cases, where parental alienation has been decisive?
You hear it thrown around in family law cases. I've been practicing family law for 31 years. You certainly hear allegations and accusations of parental alienation. I don't know that I've seen a more severe case than this case, the Jones case, and what's happened tragically to the Jones children. But I don't know that you get many sort of jury trials of this magnitude with national focus and awareness to really shine the spotlight on parental alienation. So to answer your question, yes, there are trials like this, but I'm not sure that there's one that's had this kind of impact, at least in Texas, and we're certainly hopeful that it reaches the national level because, again, millions of kids are suffering from this.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. I think people should know that I did bring up parental alienation to many of the experts in this case. And I even had a family therapist, for example, give me a book on parental alienation. And yet they took no effort to try and help the children with it or to see what it is. And it really is child abuse. I mean, it's emotional child abuse, which is documented to be as severe or even worse than physical abuse. It's horrific for the kids, and it's just irresponsible for the community to have acted as it did. I'm not saying that everyone was bad, but there were players involved who clearly saw the signs and even told me, well, your attorney needs to prove it up in court before we can do anything. I mean, experts in family law case, court-appointed family therapists should be responsible to help and heal children, period. And they should be able to step up when they see the signs of alienation and not worry about a filing coming in, you know, or something coming in or missing a referral, a high-dollar referral, and they should do what they're court ordered to do, which is to help the family reunite. And just as one other point, I mean, I alone had to attend family therapy with our children. Our children were extremely distressed and exhibiting signs of extreme distress, and Alex didn't even participate in family therapy with them. I mean, it's unbelievable. They just turned a blind eye to him. And nobody believed me that Alex had been abusive to me in our past, and so they construed my anxiety, which is a common sort of manifestation of a targeted parent. You're anxious and afraid for your children. You don't know what to do. You're trying to communicate to people. They interpret that as some sort of extremis and really miscast me into having issues that I really don't think I have, or that I only had situationally because of the alienation.
I agree.
And, you said that there's continuing alienation, and then also I don't know if you can or want to speak to your children's reaction towards that.
Well, thank you for the question. You know, I certainly don't talk to my children about any of this, and it would be my extreme hope that they are sheltered from all knowledge of this. Apparently, that's not the case, as Alex relayed in his press conference. And that's a real tragedy, and that's sort of a manifestation of alienation, because it's the parent's job to protect children and to cushion them from having to be in the public eye or knowing about, you know, extreme high conflict divorce issues. You know, I don't want to bring my children into this. They have enough on their plate as it is. I'm grateful for the community around them that's protected them, again, for the press's respect to their privacy, and I know that we can get through this.
And were you encouraged that, in just the press conference that went all over the place, that he did seem to be okay with a new arrangement, and you're only 10 miles apart? And it just sounded like he was saying this was not that he didn't lose the case, and that he's okay with the outcome.
Well, I would make two statements about that. Alex's favorite thing to do is to present perception as reality. So he'll make a broad statement, and many of the statements in his press conference were false and even defamatory. Some were extremely defamatory. But his statement that this is business as usual and that this is what we agreed to, due to the complexities of my case, I can't go into the background right now. I'd be happy to talk to any journalist at length about that at a later time. But this is not anything like where I've been for the past 3 years. And in Texas, my understanding, and maybe Robert can clarify it, but the ruling of the jury that I should be primary parent, my understanding is the judge, the sort of parameters around which people rule on this, judges rule on this, is the perception that I would have primary and that he would have a standard visitation schedule. And of course, we've asked for additional protections in the meanwhile, but it's my hopes that we get there. Robert?
I think that was well said. I would add to it a few points, which is, I don't know, I guess it's humorous to me in terms of how Mr. Jones and his counsel characterized the jury's verdict. I mean, when I was watching their press conference, it sounded like they won, and it sounded like they were at a different trial than I was at and that I participated in. The jury's decision in this case was profound and completely altering in terms of the kids' relationship with each parent. Prior to the jury verdict, Ms. Jones had limited time with the children, sometimes supervised, very few overnight visitations, if you will, and just a complete struggle. She would step up a stair or two, and then the system would knock her back down, and she'd step up again, and she just really never, ever got to the point of having the kind of relationship she did when she was the primary parent. Then the jury comes and says, we name you what's called in Texas joint managing conservators, which is basically joint custody, but you, Ms. Jones, have the right to determine the primary residence of the children, and that means she has the right to determine that all three of these kids will live primarily with her. A huge shift in the dynamic in this family. And they will be primarily living with her. Now, the judge will get to decide how much time Mr. Jones has, whether or not these protective measures that we're requesting are put in place so that the therapy can take place for the children. Mr. Jones is excluded for a short period of time until he stops his alienating behavior, and then he's brought back into it. But, I mean, I heard statements like this is just words to the effect of this is just a 50-50 arrangement, and this is what I was always looking for. I mean, if you were to look at the record in this case, Mr. Jones and his attorneys, step after step after step, try to do everything they could to keep Ms. Jones from having a normal, healthy relationship with the children. I even heard one statement where he said, well, they're just going to be living, now that she gets to decide the primary residence, they're just going to be living 8 miles apart, so what's the big deal? I mean, it's an enormous big deal, and we don't yet know whether or not there will be this protective period where he has no contact, and then even after that, like my client said, the likely result would be what's called a standard possession order, where a parent visits on the first, third, and fifth weekends, and then also has some midweek visit in the second and fourth weeks of the month. But I mean, it's a total paradigm shift, and those statements that this is what he always expected, or it was a neutral result, or there's nothing to be concerned about from his end, strike me as the very fake news that he complains about constantly on all the national issues about which you're aware that he speaks on.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that again, there were just so many statements that Alex made in his press conference that were pure fiction. A lot of them were really hurtful to me, and I feel completely defamed and misrepresented my character. And I'm looking about addressing those in the press to anybody who wants to speak to me, or I guess I'm going to have to reach out to him to ask him to retract those and then see what happens. I think, Jonathan, your question about parental alienation, if this is around and there's this or the other, my assumption is, to get a step ahead of Alex, kind of knowing how he operates, is there is definitely a movement of alienators in the country that is pushing to sort of negate the existence of something called parental alienation. And I think the facts are in. There's tons of peer-reviewed writing from great psychologists across the country and PhDs about parental alienation. And again, I've launched my site, and I'm not trying to plug it so much as give people a venue to really have a place to go to get information on the case, because my case is years long, extremely complicated. I mean, would you say it's one of the most complicated cases you've ever seen?
Absolutely, in parental alienation, certainly.
Yeah, so I'm available anytime also if Alex wants to have me on his show or come on my show that I'm going to launch to talk about our case. And I reach out to him to do that and hope we can join together for our children.
What show is that?
I'm going to be launching a podcast that I hope to branch into radio with. It's Split City Radio.
Yeah, probably won't go into too much detail about that case at this time. There is a pending case involving some tort or some basically personal injury claims brought by Ms. Jones against Mr. Jones. That case was severed or split apart, if you will, from the underlying custody case that we just tried. So that's almost like a brand new case that's just starting. Probably not going to go into much detail at this point about what that's about and where it might lead, but I mean, the goal is not to have endless litigation in this family. The goal is to have peace and to have healthy children and to have two parents participating in their lives. That's really what the focus is.
This was sort of in the background. The reason why they got to go first, they initiated this particular court proceeding. Is that accurate?
Yes, they filed a motion back in 2015 that started this process. We filed a counter motion asking for custody, which the jury awarded to us. And in Texas, the party who files a suit first is basically the plaintiff or the petitioner in a family law case, and that means they get to call their witnesses and present their evidence first.
What was their original motion?
You know, I don't have it in front of me. It had to do with some visitation modifications.
Taking away more time from me,
Yep.
taking the children away more.
And you sort of corrected the record, you said on alimony or child support, but in the trial it said that you received a certain amount each month and then received some money initially. Is that a different category? Is that what you're saying, or is that inaccurate?
I mean, I have been protective of the financial issues of my case due to orders that I understood to be in place. However, because of the way that Alex has gone out boldly and made great misstatements like you've just heard, that saying I filed first when he did, I will say, you know, the settlement I received at the end of our divorce, the payments are actually payments on my final settlement. There's no alimony or child support. In fact, I paid for all of the therapy after, you know, I think it was a few months, all of the supervision, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I pay for school and other things like that. So, and I obviously have a very disproportionate income. So that's why the judge's ruling that's upcoming is so important. And as Robert said, I don't want to be in endless litigation. You know, Alex at his press conference, or Randy Wilhite stepped up and said, we have a lot coming down the pike. I don't understand why that is. I mean, this is about 3 beautiful children who just need a break and to come home to their mama and to have a mama and daddy that can get along and just stop this crazy fight. I mean, the money that's been wasted on this could have helped so many children in need or stop, help other issues. But I was forced to stay in the fight because of his aggression. But the ruling that's coming up, I think, does need to be decisive, because unless it is, he's going to keep coming at me, and he's made that pretty apparent. And for the best interests of our children, I believe that Judge Naranjo will rule as the hero she can be, and make a statement about alienation in her ruling.
We certainly hope so. I agree with what was said.
And maybe each of you could just say if there was something, if there was either a decisive moment or something, a moment in the trial that you felt things turned, or that you felt like you could, change some minds on the jury.
I know you asked, is there a moment, and I think I'm maybe going to take a lawyer sidestep and at least tell you 3, maybe 4, that I thought were really key moments. One was Bobby Newman's cross-examination of Alex Jones. Mr. Jones kept it together for a very short period of time and then basically unraveled and continued to unravel throughout the examination. I thought Bobby did an extremely effective job of showing the jury who this man really is, even though we couldn't get the InfoWar tapes into the jury so that they would really see what he's like and his screaming and ranting and raving and what have you. Mr. Newman was able to elicit that on the stand, and I thought that was very effective. Second point would be, I think, the direct examination that I did with Ms. Jones. I thought that she was very personable. She was very real. I thought that she spoke from her heart. I thought that she was compelling. She indicated that there were many good qualities about Mr. Jones, and really reached the hand out across the aisle, if you will, to try to partner with him, whereas he testified that she didn't have a single, basically, redeeming quality as a parent. 2 others real quickly would be the cross-examination of Dr. Siegel, who was the alienation expert, who did 2 different reports indicating that he found no evidence, not even a shred of evidence of alienation, and yet the courtroom was littered with alienation signposts all over the place, and I think that he was very discredited in his work. And then I'm hoping that in the closing argument that I gave, that I was able to touch some emotional chords with this jury and really tie it all together and plead with them that they were the last line of defense in stopping Alex Jones from this alienating campaign against Kelly Jones. And I think they listened, and I think they heard the message. So those to me were kind of the most significant moments in the trial.
And I would respond, your previous question was about sort of, I guess, the pace of the trial. From a layperson's point of view, of course, it's very interesting. And what happened is that the other side, Alex's side, as the plaintiff or petitioner, they presented their case for the majority of the trial. So they had they called their witnesses, they used their time to have their case in chief be presented. So the majority of our argument actually was presented in cross-examination, or coming back and interviewing the people that they had that were their friendly witnesses. I think it was with maybe a day and a half or maybe 2 days left that Robert was able to actually go on direct examination. And I mean, the second that he went out there and showed how many therapists had missed the ball and the signs of parental alienation that people clearly missed, and really just presented the facts because the facts are true and evident, I think that immediately shifted the case. I was particularly vindicated when the previous guardian ad litem, Allison Wilcox, who lied about me in her guardian ad litem report, which is a report that's given to a judge and is perceived as an affidavit. When her testimony finally came out that she had lied in that report and in previous temporary orders hearing, I believe that if she had not misrepresented the truth, I wouldn't have been in this litigation for that long. And then also, Alex's side likes to say, oh, I think everybody got it wrong or everybody's bad. And that's absolutely not true. There were wonderful people that helped me through this process from within the system as well. Many of them supervisors, particularly Sandra Aguilar and Loretta Mays, who testified at the trial and said, we were in the trenches with Kelly. They were really the only people that saw me with my children. And they said we were reporting things to the higher-ups, and they were just summarily ignoring us. So I think these are 2 ladies with a tremendous amount of experience and very respected in the community. And when Loretta Mays testified that Alyssa Sherry, who was the later case manager who sort of made herself a guardian ad litem in my case, had basically indicated to her that she didn't want me to get my children back because then she wouldn't have a job or be making the money she was, which coincidentally was hundreds of thousands of dollars. When she testified to that on the stand, and I believe said that she took a polygraph because she was so offended by her having said that, that also was very important to me, because the parental alienation has been missed, but unfortunately in my case as well, there have been some very questionable behavior by some experts who had a lot of power.
I was just curious also, what did you make of what the jury may have thought about the fact that their ex-husband was constantly making faces and movements and expressions? Did that work to his advantage or his disadvantage?
You know, that's an interesting question. I mean, I probably pointed out to the judge and to the jury 5 to 10 times during the trial, I don't recall exactly. Mr. Jones was positioned in such a way that he was looking right at the jury, and they could see his face, his demonstrative facial expressions, you know, shaking his head and, you know, rolling his eyes, and it was, I mean, it was very obvious. It was very, it seemed very intentional to me. You know, who ultimately won that? I don't know. I mean, I know that we got the jury verdict that we wanted, so maybe my pointing that out time and time again actually did have a benefit. But the point in all of that was that Mr. Jones, even though the judge would instruct him time and time again, stop doing that, don't shake your head, sit there, don't show any expression, would just do it and do it over and over again. And that was part of my closing argument, that this is not a man that can be controlled, ladies and gentlemen. You are the only ones left that can make a difference in these kids' lives. So I would have to imagine, on balance, that all of that demonstrative head shaking and you know, sort of subliminal messages to the jury cut against him.
Oh, I just wanted to add to that. You know, Robert's a great diplomat, but what I do know, having been in the court system for a few years now, is that Alex's behavior in court was extreme and outrageous, and many judges would have thrown him in jail for that behavior. And I certainly think I didn't exhibit the same. I'm not saying I'm better or worse, but the court is a place that commands respect. And when a judge tells you to stop behaving in a certain way, you need to listen to the judge and respect her authority.
Were you surprised that he continued to broadcast during the trial and say things that were relevant?
I think so, because we did have a gag order or a protective order that prohibited us from speaking to the press during the course of the trial. Obviously, Mr. Jones is a public celebrity, and he's got his own format and platform to say what he wants to say. And I understand there was some other litigation potentially going on at the same time in his life, and maybe he was kind of blurring the edges about saying things that were related to the trial, but also maybe related to other matters that he might have been embroiled in. I mean, I don't know that we thought that we could effectively stop him from doing that, so I think we just kind of continued on, kept our nose down, our head down, and with the task at hand, and I'm not really sure that it had any impact on the verdict.
I'll say it's very frustrating to me, and I was very concerned about him doing it because there was a gag order in place, to my understanding, that the judge was very strongly telling us, you know, there's a gag order, you can't talk. My understanding, and Robert, I might be wrong, was that she was going to come back at the end of the trial and to rule on whether or not Alex had been in violation of the court orders. I believe he was, and I believe at the time he had his press conference he was. I believe that she had told us that the gag order was in place until she had lifted it. There's some things that happened post facto, but the fact of the matter is what's on the transcript is that's what she said. That's why I'm just now talking. I sure would have liked to talk to you guys a long time ago, and I've held my silence for many years out of respect for the court and to protect my children. In addition to Alex violating the order in that way, he's broken the seal of our case, which is absolutely not okay. And the way that he did that is he's presented documents out of context and broadcast them from his own attorney's office, David Minton, who should not be allowing that to be happening from his office. That's inappropriate. The documents are under seal, and it's irresponsible and inappropriate and in violation of court order for them to be broadcast. And the way he presented them was very, you know, as usual, a manipulation of the facts.
Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, I know we've spoken about this in the court. It's claimed by his legal team, they're trying to put out there to some extent an act, this program
Let me just say, I mean, I'm shocked that Alex has any viewers left at all after being willing to go before the court and say that he's an actor and that, oh, sometimes he believes in what he says, but sometimes it's just an act and it's performance art, but then it's not, but then it is. I think Alex's own press conference that he had right after the trial, where he says that he told the children something like that the press were a tick on a dog's rear end, and all of his philosophy clearly demonstrates that there is no disconnect, that he's absolutely immersed our children in the toxic culture and beliefs that he expounds on InfoWars, which have greatly deteriorated over the years and have descended into the crass, the vulgar, the misogynistic, the homophobic, with outright proclamations touting violence and inciting horrific shootings across the country. And I am just horrified for them to have any association or understanding of it, particularly as related to the Sandy Hook shootings, which I'm just cannot fathom how those people have to deal with people saying that they're beautiful children that they lost and that's not real. I can't understand that. I can't understand why Alex's attorneys, Allison and Randy Wilhite, would go on that venue. I think as family lawyers, people should not participate in a venue that expounds hate and lies about the deaths of children.
Do you think it was ever acting, or was it just really more?
There is no disconnect between the crazy, ranting, raving Alex Jones on the air and the crazy, ranting, raving Alex Jones at home. He's a violent, scary, and aggressive man, and he terrorized me during our marriage and has since. He is absolutely unstable. There is nothing that is controlled about him, and he exhibited that in court by his actions.
Well, I think he and his legal team had an interesting tightrope to walk, which was they weren't perhaps completely sure about how much evidence of who he really was and InfoWars and so on was going to come in throughout the course of the trial. So they had a balance on the one hand, sort of protecting, if it did come in, having an explanation for it, and the explanation was it's performance art, he's acting, it's not really him. And then also the obligation, if you will, to try to appear as a sane, rational parent, for which it would be in the kid's best interest to stay with him, in which case he would have to distance himself from that, very much. So, I don't know, it was an interesting dynamic to watch during the course of the trial, to see the lawyers and Mr. Jones himself kind of squirm through those different holes at different times. And I think it kind of left a confusing impression for the jury.
Well, did you ever contemplate, and maybe this was something you couldn't go to, but talking about what he said about Sandy Hook?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we were allowed to try the case that we wanted to try, we would have presented all of that kind of evidence. And it was not an issue about trying Mr. Jones and his politics and trying to, poison a jury based on their political views versus his. I just don't see, and I've never been able to see in a child custody case, how you can get on the air, say these poisonous, toxic things, and then also try to argue, well, when I go home, I'm the model father and I don't expose my kids to it. So I thought the jury needed to know all of those things, the Sandy Hook conspiracy, the 9/11 conspiracy, the comments about, my client's already enumerated the kinds of things that he says, and everybody knows by looking on InfoWars. That's something we very much wanted to do.
How many hours of InfoWars do you log?
Me personally?
Yes.
Way too many. Way too many. Probably, I mean, countless, tens and tens of hours, and have had my staff catalog. I mean, it's such a target-rich pool of evidence, everything that he says on the air. I mean, we probably would have liked to have shown the jury over the course of a 2-week trial at least a couple hours of who he is, what he says, and how that can't possibly be good for these children. But we didn't get the opportunity to do it.
How much did you know about Alex Jones before you took this case?
Actually, I had not heard of him personally before I took this case. But when I took this case and then started to talk about, just amongst my staff, and I realized that there really was quite a bit of knowledge. And as we reached out into the community regarding potential witnesses and so on, I mean, it's obvious that he's got quite a following. He's got quite a platform. I don't know, how many millions of people watch his show, but he's got quite an audience. There's no question about it.
And the stuff that didn't come in to me was really shocking. that the jury didn't get to see, you know, Alex, for example, drunk and berating a woman and making misogynistic comments about her and becoming almost, you know, obviously aggressive to her, that the jury wasn't able to see, I mean, clips, and I don't want to talk about my children, that had my children in them, that didn't come before them. I think it's obvious and apparent that this is the culture that Alex is not trying only to inflict on my children, our children, but on the children of America and on good people of America. And a lot of it, folks, according to Alex himself, is just a sham. You know, which of it is true, which of it isn't, when it behooves him, is it true or not? I mean, Alex has launched a money bomb since this, I think based off of his press conference, to raise money by selling vitamin supplements. I think it's concerning. I think people need to be really asking questions about what they're consuming and really look at who they're looking to lead them with their political views. And that's not something that should come before the court, necessarily political views, but views related to, you know, homophobia or misogyny or racism, extreme racist things, including, you know, and I've seen my children, unfortunately, I'm sure they'll get out of it, but some of these traits have been assumed a little bit.
Any other questions from anybody?
Can I make one closing statement?
Sure.
Just again, I just have the best kids in the world, and I'm really hopeful and super happy they're coming home. I believe that the judge can and will rule immediately and proactively to move them into my custody. And I again reach out to Alex with an olive branch and say, you know, I'm sure some of the things that were said in this conference weren't pleasant to hear, but it is my goal that we should join together as parents and do what's best for our children, and that we both be their parents, and they need us both. And I'm willing anytime again to talk to you in public or in private, on your show or in another venue, to talk about this. And thanks, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Kelly. Truly, it's a great result for Kelly and these kids. Thank you for your attendance today. We really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much for coming out. Mm-hmm.